When 66-year-old Margaret Russo became homeless and found shelter in a broken elevator stuck between floors in an abandoned office building, she thought she'd found temporary safety. But on her fifth night, while examining the elevator panel looking for a way to get more light, she noticed something strange, a button labeled B13 that didn't match any floor in the building's directory. When she pressed it, the elevator suddenly hummed to life and descended to a floor that, according to the building's blueprints, didn't exist. What Margaret found on that impossible floor wasn't just shocking. It was a fully operational research facility that had been running in secret for 30 years, conducting experiments that were supposed to have been shut down by international treaty. Stay until the end, because what Margaret discovered on floor B13 is still being investigated by federal authorities, and the truth is more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Margaret Russo had been a history teacher for 38 years before Alzheimer's took her husband and medical bills took everything else. She'd spent their savings on his care, watching him fade until he no longer recognized her. When he died, she had nothing left. No house, no savings, barely enough for his funeral. At 66, Margaret found herself on the street with a backpack and memories she wished she could forget. She tried shelters, but they were overcrowded. She tried staying with former colleagues, but their sympathy had limits. After 2 weeks sleeping on benches and in doorways, Margaret found the Hartley building, a 15-story office complex that had been empty for 3 years, waiting for a buyer that never came. The ground floor windows were boarded up, but Margaret found a service entrance with a broken lock. Inside, the building was dark and silent. Dust covered everything, but it was dry and relatively warm. She explored carefully, looking for a safe place to sleep. That's when she found the elevator. It was stuck between the 3rd and 4th floors, doors jammed half open. Margaret squeezed inside. The elevator car was spacious, carpeted, with mirrored walls. Most importantly, she could wedge the doors closed from inside, creating a secure space where nobody could reach her. She made a bed from old lobby furniture cushions she'd found. It wasn't comfortable, but it was safer than the street. The elevator became her home. For 4 nights, Margaret lived in that stuck elevator. She'd leave at dawn to use public restrooms and look for food, then return after dark. She'd sit in the dark elevator car, using her phone's flashlight sparingly to save battery, and think about how her life had come to this. On the 5th night, Margaret was examining the elevator panel more carefully. She'd been pressing buttons randomly earlier in the week, hoping to get the lights working, but nothing had responded. The elevator seemed completely dead. But now, looking closer with her flashlight, she noticed something odd. The button panel showed floors 1 through 15, plus basement levels B1 and B2. Standard for an office building. But at the bottom of the panel, partially hidden behind grime and a loose trim piece, was another button. It was smaller, unmarked except for a faded label that read B13. B13. Margaret had explored the basement levels through the building's stairwells. There were only 2, B1 for parking, B2 for mechanical systems. There was no B13. That didn't make sense. It had to be a mistake, maybe a manufacturing error on the panel, but Margaret was curious, and bored, and desperate for any distraction from her situation. She pressed the B13 button, expecting nothing. The elevator suddenly hummed to life. Margaret jumped back, startled. The lights flickered on, bright fluorescent panels overhead. The doors, which had been jammed for who knows how long, slid smoothly closed, and the elevator began moving. Down. Margaret's heart raced. She pressed other buttons frantically. 1, 2, anything to stop it. Then it kept going. B3, B4, B5. This isn't possible, Margaret whispered. The building only had 2 basement levels. She'd seen the blueprints posted in the lobby, but the elevator kept descending. B6, B7, B8. The descent seemed to take forever. Finally, at B13, the elevator stopped. The doors slid open. Margaret stepped out cautiously. She was in a corridor, clean, well-lit, with white walls and a polished floor that reflected the fluorescent lights above. Nothing like the abandoned, dusty building 13 floors above. This place was maintained. Active. She walked forward slowly, her footsteps echoing. The corridor had doors on both sides, each labeled with alphanumeric codes. Lab A7, Storage C12, Observation Room 4. At the end of the corridor was a reception desk, unmanned but with a computer screen glowing softly. Margaret approached the desk. On the screen was a login prompt and a logo she didn't recognize, a stylized double helix with the letters HRDC underneath. She tried searching her memory. HRDC, she'd never heard of it. Behind the reception desk was a large door marked Main Research Floor, Authorized Personnel Only. Margaret pushed it. It swung open easily. What she saw on the other side took her breath away. A massive laboratory, easily the size of a warehouse, filled with equipment she couldn't begin to identify. Rows of glass chambers containing what looked like suspension tanks. Computer stations with monitors displaying data and graphs. And in the center, a large cylindrical structure that hummed with energy, surrounded by warning signs. But what shocked Margaret most was that the facility wasn't abandoned. It was active. She could hear the hum of equipment, see lights blinking on control panels, notice the sterile smell of a working laboratory. Someone was maintaining this place. Someone was still conducting research here. Margaret walked between the stations, careful not to touch anything. On one desk, she found a folder marked Project Chrysalis, Phase 7 Results. She opened it and started reading. The documents were dense with scientific terminology she didn't fully understand. But certain phrases jumped out. Cellular regeneration, age reversal, unauthorized continuation, treaty violations. If this is shocking you as much as it shocked Margaret, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories need to be told. Margaret kept reading, piecing together what she could. Project Chrysalis had apparently been a government-funded research program in the 1990s, investigating cellular regeneration and age-related diseases. According to the documents, it had been shut down in 1998 after international treaties banned certain types of human cellular experimentation. But it hadn't been shut down. It had been moved here, to this secret floor beneath the Hartley building, and continued operating for 3 more decades. The research had apparently progressed far beyond what Margaret thought was scientifically possible. They claimed to have achieved not just slowed aging, but actual age reversal at the cellular level. She found test logs describing subjects, though the documents called them participants, who had undergone treatments. Before and after photographs showed people in their 70s and 80s who appeared to have regressed to their 40s or 50s. The results seemed impossible, but the documentation was detailed, clinical, undeniably real. Margaret moved deeper into the laboratory. That's when she found the chambers. Glass cylinders tall enough to hold a person, filled with clear liquid and connected to elaborate systems of tubes and monitoring equipment. There were 12 of them, arranged in a circle around the central cylindrical structure. 11 were empty, but the 12th chamber contained a person. Margaret approached slowly, her reflection distorted in the curved glass. Inside the chamber was an elderly woman, suspended in the liquid, breathing apparatus attached to her face, sensors covering her body. She appeared to be unconscious, floating peacefully. Margaret looked at the monitor attached to the chamber. It displayed vital signs, heart rate, blood pressure, brain activity, all within normal ranges. And at the top of the screen was a name. Subject 47, initiation date 0315 Tom 2023. Current phase, regeneration cycle 7. This woman had been here for months. Margaret checked the other monitors. According to the logs, Subject 47 had been 81 years old when she entered the program. Now, according to the cellular analysis displayed on screen, her biological age had regressed to approximately 62. The treatment was working. Margaret felt sick. This was human experimentation. This was illegal. This was... Who are you? Margaret spun around. A man in a white lab coat stood behind her, his expression more surprised than angry. He was in his 50s, carrying a tablet, clearly a researcher or doctor. I got lost, Margaret stammered. The elevator brought you here? He looked puzzled. That's not possible. The B13 access is coded. You need authorization to... He stopped, studying her more carefully. You're homeless, aren't you? You've been sleeping in the stuck elevator upstairs. Margaret didn't know whether to run or stay. I didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave. I won't tell anyone about this place. The man sighed. Please don't run. Let me explain. My name is Dr. Richard Chen. I'm the director of what's left of Project Chrysalis, and I think you deserve to understand what you've found. Over the next hour, Dr. Chen explained everything. Project Chrysalis had indeed been shut down officially in 1998. But a small team of researchers, convinced their work was too important to abandon, had secretly continued. They'd moved operations to this hidden floor, built back in the 1960s as a Cold War fallout shelter, and modified over the years into a sophisticated laboratory. We're not monsters, Dr. Chen said. Every person in our program is a volunteer. Terminally ill patients, people in their final years who have nothing to lose. We offer them a chance at more time. Some respond to treatment, some don't. But everyone who comes here knows the risks and chooses to participate. But it's illegal, Margaret said. The treaties were written by politicians who don't understand the science, who banned research that could save millions of lives because they were afraid of hypothetical dangers. Yes, what we're doing is illegal. But is it immoral to offer dying people a chance to live? Margaret didn't have an answer to that. She thought about her husband, how she would have given anything for more time with him. Would she have agreed to experimental treatment if it meant he could have stayed himself for longer? Dr. Chen studied her thoughtfully. You've lost someone. Recently. I can see it in your eyes. My husband. Alzheimer's. I'm sorry, that's a cruel disease. He paused. Margaret, may I call you Margaret? You seem like a practical woman. You found this place by accident, but now you're here. You could expose us, turn us in, end decades of research that could change the world, or what? Or you could participate. You're 66, healthy despite your circumstances. Imagine being 40 again. Physically, mentally, having decades of life ahead of you. We've perfected the process. Our success rate is over 80%. Subject 47 in Chamber 12 will wake up next month as essentially a middle-aged woman with her whole life to rebuild. Margaret looked at the woman suspended in the tank, then at Dr. Chen. You're asking me to become a test subject. I'm offering you a choice. Stay homeless, age naturally, watch your body fail over the next 20 years, or take a chance on being young again, on having time, real time. Margaret spent 3 days on floor B13. Dr. Chen gave her a room in the facility's living quarters. Yes, there were living quarters, complete with comfortable beds, a kitchen, even a small library. Several researchers lived down here permanently, unable to surface without risking exposure. She met the other team members. 8 scientists and doctors, all brilliant, all committed to work they believed in even though the world had declared it illegal. They showed her their data, their results, their failures and successes. They were honest about the risks. 15% of participants didn't survive the process, their systems unable to handle the cellular regeneration. Another 5% survived, but with complications, their bodies rejecting the changes. But 80% emerged, transformed. Biologically younger, healthier, with decades added to their lifespans. On the 4th day, Margaret made her decision. She agreed to participate. The process took 6 weeks. Margaret was placed in one of the suspension chambers, kept in a medically induced sleep, while nanomachines, technology she barely understood, worked through her body, repairing damaged cells, reversing age-related degeneration, essentially turning back her biological clock. When she woke up, Dr. Chen was standing beside her chamber. Welcome back, Margaret. How do you feel? Margaret sat up slowly. Her body felt different, lighter, stronger. She looked at her hands. The age spots were gone, her skin smooth and firm. She touched her face and felt the tight, elastic skin of a much younger woman. They brought her a mirror. Staring back at her was a woman in her early 40s, still recognizably herself, but decades younger. Her gray hair had regained its original dark brown color. The wrinkles around her eyes had vanished. She looked like she had when her husband first met her. Margaret started crying. It worked. It actually worked. But there was a problem. Margaret couldn't leave. She couldn't go back to the world looking 40 when she'd been 66 6 weeks ago. People would ask questions. Investigations would follow. the facility would be discovered. Dr. Chen offered her a choice. Stay on floor B13, work with the team, help other participants, or take a new identity, fabricated documents, and start over somewhere far away where nobody knew Margaret Russo. Margaret chose the new identity. Dr. Chen's team had done this before. They had connections, resources, ways of creating believable paper trails. Within a month, Margaret had become Rachel Morrison, a 42-year-old woman relocating from Seattle, complete with work history, references, and a small financial cushion the program provided to help participants restart their lives. Before she left floor B13 for the last time, Margaret asked Dr. Chen one final question. Why did the elevator bring me down here? It was stuck for years. Why did it suddenly work when I pressed B13? Dr. Chen smiled. Because I activated it. We monitor the building's security cameras, even though it's supposed to be abandoned. When I saw you'd been sleeping in that elevator for days, I felt sympathy. I reviewed your background, learned about your husband, your losses, and I thought you deserved a chance. So I coded the B13 button to respond to anyone in that elevator, hoping you'd be curious enough to press it. You recruited me? I offered you an option. The choice was always yours. Today, Rachel Morrison is 43 years old, or rather appears to be. She lives in Portland, works as a consultant for a non-profit that helps homeless populations, and has a small apartment overlooking the river. She's built a new life from nothing, younger and stronger than she's been in decades. She still thinks about floor B13 sometimes, about the researchers working in secret, believing their illegal work is worth the risk, about the people suspended in chambers, being given impossible second chances, about the ethics of what she participated in. Was it right? Was it wrong? Rachel still doesn't know, but she's alive, she's healthy, she has time, and sometimes that has to be enough. If this story made you think, please like this video and subscribe. Share it with someone who appreciates stories that challenge our understanding of what's possible. Leave a comment. What would you have done? Would you have taken the treatment? Thank you for watching, and remember that sometimes losing everything puts us in places where impossible choices become possible. Sometimes a broken elevator leads to floors that shouldn't exist. And sometimes the only way forward is to become someone new.